The look on my brother-in-law Greg's face when he saw the sheriff standing on my porch with the formal notice was better than any sunset I've ever seen over my back 40. He stood there, holding a box of expensive Italian marble tiles for a backslash he'd never get to install, and his jaw didn't just drop, it practically hit the gravel. For 6 months, he'd treated me like a senile ghost haunting my own property, a relic of the past who was too old and too slow to notice what was happening right under his nose. He thought he'd pulled off the ultimate better to ask forgiveness than permission real estate play, assuming I'd be grateful for the upgrade to my land. But he forgot one very important thing. I spent 40 years as a structural engineer and land surveyor. I don't miss a single inch, and I never, ever forget where the lines are drawn. But to understand why Greg is currently staring at a mountain of debt and a pile of rubble, I need to take you back to the beginning. I bought this land in 1978. 30 acres of rolling hills, thick timber, and a creek that runs cold even in the middle of a July heat wave. I didn't inherit it. I didn't stumble into it. I worked 80-hour weeks at the firm, took every dirty field job no one else wanted, and saved every nickel until I could buy this slice of heaven outright. I built the main house with my own 2 hands, stone by stone. I raised my daughter, Sarah, here. I buried my favorite hunting dogs in the clearing by the oaks. This land isn't just dirt to me. It's my life's work, my retirement, and the legacy I intended to leave for my grandkids. Then came Greg. Greg is my wife Martha's younger brother, a man who has spent his entire 50 years looking for a shortcut. He's the kind of guy who wears $300 shoes to a backyard barbecue and talks loudly about passive income and disrupting the market. He's had 5 businesses in 10 years, and every single one of them failed because of bad luck or haters, never because he's lazy and arrogant. 2 years ago, Greg and his wife moved back to the area after his latest consulting firm went belly up. Martha, bless her heart, has a soft spot for her baby brother. She convinced me to let them park their trailer on a small corner of the property while they got back on their feet. I agreed, mostly for Martha's sake, but I set clear boundaries. I told him he could stay in the north paddock, near the road, and that he wasn't to touch the woods or the meadow. "I got it, Artie," he'd say, slapping me on the back with that greasy salesman smile. "I'm just here to reset. You won't even know I'm here." That should have been my wake-up call, but I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that even a man like Greg wouldn't be bold enough to disrespect a man in his own home. I was wrong. It started small. A few trees cleared here, a little brush management there. Greg claimed he was just making the area more aesthetic. I told him to stop, that I liked the woods exactly as they were. He'd just roll his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking, making a crazy gesture to his wife. He started calling me Pops or the old general, always with a condescending tilt to his head. He spoke to me slowly, like I was losing my faculties, while simultaneously asking to borrow my tractor or my chainsaw. The real escalation happened last spring. I had to go in for a double hip replacement, years of heavy lifting finally catching up to me. I was laid up in a rehab facility for 6 weeks, and then I was confined to the main house for another 2 months. During that time, the sound of heavy machinery became a constant backdrop to my recovery. When I asked Greg what was going on, he laughed. "Just doing some landscaping, Artie. I'm putting in a little garden for Martha, a surprise for when you're back on your feet. Don't worry your gray head about it."
Martha seemed nervous, but she wouldn't look me in the eye. "He's just trying to help, Arthur," she'd say, smoothing my blankets. "You know how Greg gets when he has an idea." If that was all, I probably would have let it go. But then came the day I finally got cleared to use my cane and walk down to the meadow. I expected to see a garden. Instead, I saw a full-blown construction site. Greg hadn't built a garden. He had cleared 2 acres of my prime timber, oaks that were older than me, and poured a massive concrete foundation. He had a crew there framing out a structure that looked less like a garden shed and more like a luxury villa. It was a 2,500 square foot pool house, complete with vaulted ceilings, a wraparound porch and plumbing lines for a full kitchen and 2 bathrooms. I stood there, leaning on my cane, feeling the blood start to boil in my veins. Greg walked over, wearing a hard hat like he was some kind of foreman, holding a clipboard. "Surprise!" he shouted, spreading his arms wide. I figured, why let this land sit here doing nothing? It's unused, right? So I'm building the Evergreen Retreat. It's going to be a high-end short-term rental. I've already got the business plan. We'll split the profits 60-40. I do the work, you provide the dirt you weren't using anyway. I looked at him, my voice low and steady. I never gave you permission to build this, Greg. I never gave you permission to cut my trees. He chuckled, that dismissive, patronizing sound that makes my teeth ache. Artie, look at you. You can barely walk. You're 70 years old. What were you going to do with this back lot? Let it grow weeds until you pass on? I'm adding value here. This is a $150,000 build. It's going to make this place a gold mine. Get off my land, I said. His smile didn't even flicker. Technically, I'm family, and Martha already said she loves the idea. Why don't you go back inside and take a nap? Let the professionals handle the big boy stuff. And that's when I realized they didn't see me as their father or their brother-in-law. They saw me as a bank account with a declining mental capacity. They thought they could wait me out, build their illegal business on my property, and then claim it was too late to do anything about it once the money started rolling in. Something in me shifted that day. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't even tell Martha what I was planning. I just turned around and limped back to the house. I had spent 40 years reading contracts and understanding the law of the land. Greg thought he was playing checkers, but he didn't realize I'd been the one who built the board. I didn't say another word about the construction. I let him keep building. I let him spend every cent of the investor money he'd scammed out of his old buddies. I let him pick out the marble, the cedar siding, and the custom glass doors. I spent the next 2 months getting everything in order. I made a few quiet calls. I talked to my old friend Bill, who happens to be the best land use attorney in the state. I pulled the property deeds, the zoning requirements, and the permit logs for our county. As it turned out, Greg hadn't filed a single permit. He hadn't done a land survey. He hadn't even checked the environmental protections on the creek. He had simply assumed that because I was old and he was family, the rules didn't apply to him. He was so arrogant that he'd spent $150,000 of other people's money on a structure that didn't legally exist. They had no idea what was coming. None of them did.
The reckoning happened on a Saturday in late August. Greg had finished the exterior and was hosting a grand preview for his investors and a few family members. He'd set up catering, a bar, and had music playing from the new outdoor speakers. He was wearing a linen suit, acting like the king of the mountain. Martha was there, looking uncomfortable, and my daughter Sarah was fluttering around, clearly impressed by the glamour of it all. I waited until the crowd was at its peak, right when Greg was standing on the new porch, clinking a glass of champagne to make a speech. I pulled my truck down into the meadow, something I never do, and parked it right in the middle of his manicured guest entrance. Greg's face tightened. Artie, not the best place for the rust bucket, pal. We're in the middle of a presentation. I got out of the truck, moving slowly but with purpose. Behind me, another car pulled in. It was Bill, my lawyer, and a representative from the county building inspector's office, followed by the local sheriff, a man I'd known for 30 years. The music died down. The investors started whispering. Artie, I said, my voice carrying across the quiet meadow, you've spent a lot of time talking about what you've built on your land, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. Artie, don't do this, Greg hissed, stepping off the porch and walking toward me. Don't embarrass yourself. You're confused. We talked about this. We never talked, I said. You lectured, you dismissed, and you trespassed. I nodded to Bill. He stepped forward and handed Greg a thick envelope. Mr. Miller, Bill said loudly, this is a formal notice of violation and an order for immediate abatement. You have constructed a non-permitted structure on private property without the owner's consent. Furthermore, you have violated 3 separate environmental codes regarding the protected watershed of the creek. Greg laughed, though it sounded a bit thin. This is a joke. Martha gave me permission. She's an owner, too. Actually, I said, the deed to this specific 30-acre plot was a premarital asset held in a protected trust for my grandchildren. Martha has a life estate in the house, but she has no legal authority to authorize construction or timber removal on the back acreage. I'm the sole trustee, and I never signed a thing. The color started to drain from Greg's face. He looked at the sheriff. Jim, come on, this is a family squabble. Tell him to relax. The sheriff didn't smile. Arthur isn't the one who needs to relax, Greg. The county has issued a summary demolition order. Since the structure is unpermitted and built in a protected zone, it cannot be brought up to code. It has to come down. Demolition? Greg stammered, his voice jumping an octave. I've put $150,000 into this. I've got investors. You can't just tear it down. I'm not tearing it down, I said calmly. You are. You have 30 days to return this land to its original state. That means removing the concrete, the structure, and the debris. If you don't, the county will do it for you, and they'll lien your assets and sue your investors to cover the cost. And because you cleared protected timber, there's a $50,000 environmental fine waiting for you at the clerk's office. One of the investors, a big guy in a polo shirt, stepped forward. What do you mean, unpermitted? Greg, you told us the permits were finalized in June. Greg looked like he was going to vomit. He turned to me, his eyes wide and pleading. Artie, please, this will ruin me. I'll lose everything. I'll go to jail for fraud. Just sign the papers now. We can backdate them. Please, for Martha's sake. I looked at my wife. She was crying, but she wasn't looking at Greg. She was looking at the woods he'd destroyed, the trees I had loved. She finally saw the devastation he'd caused in his greed.
I'm done being the old general, Greg, I said. I'm just the man who owns the land, and I want my meadow back. The next 30 days were a whirlwind of legal filings and screaming matches. Greg tried to sue me, claiming unjust enrichment. My lawyer dismantled that in an afternoon. You can't be enriched by an illegal building that the state ordered you to destroy. He tried to get Martha to divorce me and take the land. She finally grew a backbone and told him that if he didn't stop, she'd testify against him in his fraud case. I sat on my porch every morning with a cup of coffee and watched. I watched the windows come out. I watched the marble tiles, the ones he was so proud of, get smashed into a dumpster. I watched the frame come down. And finally, I watched the jackhammers break up the concrete foundation. Greg is bankrupt now. His investors are suing him into the next century, and he's living in a one-bedroom apartment 2 towns over, working a retail job he hates. He doesn't come to Sunday dinner anymore. Sarah, my daughter, was angry for a while, until I showed her the photos of the century-old oaks he'd cut down just to make room for a rental he didn't have the right to build. She realized then that Greg didn't care about our family's legacy. He only cared about his own ego. It cost me some peace and a bit of family harmony for a few months, but the silence in the meadow now is worth every penny of the legal fees. I've started planting new saplings where the pool house once stood. They're small now, just tiny green shoots against the horizon. I won't be around to see them reach their full height, but my grandkids will. My wife calls Meaves Me Kitchen for lunch. She's been different lately, more attentive, more respectful. She realized I wasn't the frail old man her brother tried to paint me as. I'm still the man who built this life, and I'm still the man who protects it. My phone rings. It's a text from Greg, likely another plea for money or a curse. I don't even open it. I just delete it and put the phone in my pocket. Funny how that works. When people realize they can't walk all over you, they suddenly find their own way to walk. And I've never felt more at peace.